By the age of 17, Karch Kiraly and his best friend John Henley were well versed in using a hanger to maneuver locked gymnasium doors that stood between them and getting in some extra work with their volleyball teammates at Santa Barbara High School in California. Built in 1926 by noted architect L.A. Smith, the historic Granada Theater in downtown Santa Barbara just so happened to have the same type doors. And so it was on December 14th, 1977, the Granada was premiering a movie about a visitor from outer space. It was the follow-up directorial effort of Steven Spielberg to his blockbuster hit movie Jaws. Karch and his teammates, excited to see the movie, found the side door at the Granada, and Karch went to work with his trusty hanger, triggering the door open. Only after the boys had entered and scattered did Karch find out he was in for a close encounter with security. I'm a Venice, California-born, Los Angeles-based sports fan, one that has played, coached, announced, and promoted sports my whole life. My love affair with sports started in my own backyard and has led me to this podcast. Thanks to the support of the Amateur Athletic Union in East Bay, I'm excited to bring you Sports Stories with Denny Lennon. Hello, sports historians. Welcome to Audio Video Podcast, episode number 40 of Sports Stories with Denny Lennon, the second of our 5-part series on the greatest volleyball player of all time and the head coach of the USA Women's National Team, Karch Kiraly. Yes, friends, it's week 2 of a Kiraly July. I must say I did some good old journalistic legwork to get that story on Karch. My thanks go out to John Henley for the backstory. I think we will let Karch finish that story during the interview. Now it's time to say hello to the producer of the top video podcast in the Sentinel Adobe corridor, the director of the SSDL5 slate of shows on YouTube, and the assistant coach of the 2000 Los Angeles Catholic Youth Organization Girls Basketball Championship team, my QP, Christine Jimbo.
Hello, everybody. I'm here to remind you to get to our website, sportstoriespodcast.com. I'm also letting you know that we have our East Bay store on our website. So you can go there, get your favorite muscle tee, get some fun sports stories with Denny Lennon t-shirts and gear. We also, sponsored by East Bay, have the 7428 shootout.
That's right,
now,
we do.
This is a really cool thing. You got to go to Twitter. You got to get a Twitter account to get it. But there's a really fun shootout competition that benefits charity. And so we want as many people to vote and to follow at Sports Stories DL.
That's right. All our social media links are available on sportsstoriespodcast.com. My Twitter, as mentioned, at sportsstoriesdl. Little update as we go to record our intro for this. This will be published Thursday. We'll already have a result, but, people got to know, so I'm just going to say it. Scott Rice, known as the Girl Dad, is holding a 75% to 25% lead over Carlos Haro of Casablanca Restaurant. However, Carlos really hasn't got his charity going quite yet. His charity is
Concern Foundation, I believe.
Concern Foundation. And once he gets them mobilized, things could turn. Still got a day and a half to make it happen.
I don't know. That seems pretty insurmountable. 75 to 25%.
Yep. But if he gets the votes going, he can close it down.
How many more days to vote?
A day and a half.
Oh, boy, a day and a half.
We will see.
A little over 24 hours.
In this second installment, Karch will fill you in on that break-in at the Granada. He'll talk about his start playing beach volleyball with his dad and then graduating to better partners, how he chose UCLA, and when he first got his taste of international competition. I say let's get to it. It's time for part 2 of our 5-part Kiraly July from the USA Volleyball National Team Center in Anaheim, California. Here's our Sports Stories interview with the greatest volleyball player ever, Karch Kiraly. Please note this interview was recorded on January 17th, 2020. Your dad, I think I talked to somebody, they said one of the things they'd hear across the beach was it rise and think?
Yes.
Was that an instruction that, and that
My dad
makes
had
a whole lot of sense though.
Yeah, my dad had some great sayings, and he was very vocal on the court, so that led me to be pretty quiet because I let him do all the talking.
Okay.
But one of them you would hear would be "rise and think" in his Hungarian accent, or "jump and hit that ball, Karch." And so it was great
beautiful.
because he was a good player, and we played together for about 4 years. And much of that time, obviously, I'm just this string bean of a little kid, 11, 12, 14 years old. So the other team in beach volleyball, the beauty of it is there's only 2 players on each side. So if you and I are playing and you're somebody looks at you or looks at me, I'm a tiny little kid, and they think, oh, he's the weaker player, well, we'll serve him because he'll make the first contact, he'll pass, his partner will set, and then he'll have to hit. So they forced me to carry a huge offensive load.
Sure.
And a time when I was 11 and 12 where I couldn't even hit down. I'm just hitting it up, but trying to find, with finesse shots and control shots, try to find a way to get it to the sand. So those were, in retrospect, as challenging as it was really good for me and my development.
I understand there was something else exciting happened in Santa Barbara in 1977.
Mm-hmm.
It was a premiere on the West Coast. It sounds like of the movie Close Encounters. And I don't know, I talked to John Hanley about this. He said a few of you decided that you could make it into this premiere. Do you remember this at all?
You're going to have to remind me.
Apparently about 5 or 6 of you, probably your buddies on the high school team,
Yeah.
Found a way in through one of the doors.
Okay.
I think a hanger was involved.
Yeah.
And once you got in, you realized that the theater was full.
Was full. You're reminding me.
Everybody scattered. Do you remember the rest of this?
No. Tell me the rest.
Apparently, everybody found a seat but you.
Okay.
And as security was coming, you made a John Wilkes Booth kind of leap off the balcony in order to but luckily you didn't break your leg.
Well, the best part of that story is the hanger part of that story, because John and I and our teammates, but especially John Hanley and I, were obsessed with this sport. We just fell in love with it, and we're trying to figure out every way that we could to be good at it, both on the beach and indoors. 2-on-2 on the beach, 6-on-6 indoors. And so John got to be particularly skilled with a coat hanger, and so we got to know all the gyms around California.
Oh, there it is.
Because the typical exit to a gym, you hit the bar, you push the bar, and you move out. So if you can get from the outside, if you can get a coat hanger over that handle, pull it towards you, you open it right up.
Solid.
We were not there to vandalize or to do damage. What we were there to do is just break in to play volleyball. So we figured out how to break into Santa Barbara City College, to the Boys and Girls Club, to Santa Barbara High School. And we got kicked out a lot, but we would just say,
Love it.
oh, well, we just thought that it was open gym, because we would turn on the lights, set up the nets, the whole thing. And then we would say, well, the door was just open. The lights were on. The nets were up. And we thought it was open gym. So we're just playing. And then so they wouldn't give us any trouble. They'd just say, get out. Well, it's not open. But we figured out how to break into gyms all around Santa Barbara. And John was the master with the coat hanger. So
that's good.
One of his many great skills. And so it's actually cool that we're talking now, because in just a few weeks, Santa Barbara has it's like an unofficial Santa Barbara Beach Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Beach Volleyball Hall of Fame. The organization is actually called the FOEBA, Friends of East Beach Association. And it originally started because several years ago, one of the all-time greats, Henry Bergman, passed away. And people in Santa Barbara just said, hey, we have to honor him. Let's have a tribute to him. And so part of that tribute is they raised some funds to actually rename and give a permanent marking on East Beach and change one of the main courts there to the Henry Bergman Court.
Oh, nice.
And there's a sign on there and everything. And so they've had a few other dedications. One was to Kathy Gregory and Kathy Hanley as one of the great beach teams of all time. And John will have, in a few weeks, will have a court dedicated to him. He's the next one who's going to be to be recognized. Rightfully so, not because of his
not because of the hanger skills.
his wire coat hanger skills, but because of his great indoor and especially his beach volleyball skills.
And he spoke about John when I was talking to him. He talked about his sister Kathy bringing him to the beach, and then you were playing down there with your dad, and somehow that's how you guys got together. What made you choose UCLA, Karch?
Let's see, a couple of things. Number one. Very few people talk to me about going to their school. So either they weren't interested in me, or they somehow figured out that I already had interest in UCLA and backed off or didn't express interest. So I really only talked to Al Skates, UCLA, and Ernie Hicks with USC. Those were the two schools I had conversations with. Interested in going to a good school and a good volleyball program, and both of those offered that. But Al had done a lot of winning as the other Wizard of Westwood and ended up with 19 national titles.
Unbelievable.
I got to be a part of 3 of them, but
so
I think the other thing was just talking to Ernie Hicks. They had one of the all-time great setters at the time, eventually USA setters in Dusty Dvorak.
Oh, right. Okay.
They were running a one-setter offense, and Ernie was expressing a lot of interest in continuing to run that offense. As I was coming out of high school, I was both a setter and a hitter, more of what you would call people today call a 6-2 offense or a 2-setter offense. And Al, meanwhile, had been running a 6-2 for a long time, and there was good timing because one of their great players, Dave Albright, had just graduated, and so there was a spot open. He didn't promise it to me, but certainly he said, you have the chance to contend for this spot. And the other spot was St. John Smith. And so if I could win that, I could set a 2-setter offense and run it with one of the all-time great players, St. John, one of the all-time great beach players. And so it just seemed like a better opportunity. And Al is a really charismatic, magnetic personality and also a superb coach. And so it wasn't that difficult a decision to decide to go to UCLA, and I'm still very happy that I did.
Did you feel any of the leftover buzz from 3 years earlier, Coach Wooden being there and that basketball program? Was there any kind of because I know Coach Skates and Coach Wooden had a relationship.
Did not feel a lot of buzz. I think what if anything I noticed with UCLA is it's really hard to be the coach or coaches who come after John Wooden. And so the team was still really good, but not on the level of Coach Wooden. And so, they're still struggling today to become a consistent top 10 in the country team. And they were once John Wooden, and people don't realize how long it took him. He was there for many years before they broke through. It wasn't just, boom, he gets there and right away they start winning. They had to go through a lot of tough times and a lot of learning himself, his coaching staff, and all of his players. So there wasn't that much in the way of Wooden. Later on, I would get more exposure to Wooden because you mentioned Al and Coach Wooden had a relationship. But another person who developed a really close relationship was Marv Dunphy because he did his dissertation on John Wooden and his coaching methods.
I read some of that.
And so Marv interviewed him. Basically, he still has the tapes, really valuable things to have now, but he still has the tapes, a whole series of tapes that he transcribed and then turned into his dissertation. But that's a really special time that Marv would talk about as those times he got to share with Coach Wooden and the process of creating the interviews and the dissertation itself.
Okay, so if I'm correct, 124-5 was your years.
Yes.
And 3 titles.
Yes.
I'd like. Do you know how Walton did? Because your was the golden era, let's say, of UCLA volleyball, and you just had finished the golden era of basketball.
Well,
and
I think at one point UCLA's men's team won 88 in a row or something, so they probably were better than our 124
It's
and
very
5.
close, Karch. It's really interesting. Like Walton was 86-4, and Alcindor 88-2. And those percentages are pretty close to yours. But I was going to give you a little quiz. Could you tell me who has the best in Division I sport basketball overall record? And it's a UCLA player.
Is it a male player? Or Okay.
And he was of that era.
Keith Erickson?
Larry Farmer.
And
89-1.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
And the numbers are lower because a lot of people forget that freshmen were not even eligible to participate. So now you hear a lot of one and done. People play 1 year and they go to the NBA.
That's right.
Well, in that time, you didn't even get to do anything. Yeah. And I remember 1 year, the freshman team beat the undefeated eventual national champion team.
That's correct.
When they played a scrimmage early in the year. That's how good this freshman team.
And they were the defending champs. They would go on to go undefeated.
And they beat.
Yeah. And
that was their only loss, but it didn't count on their record because it was an intra-squad scrimmage.
That's so crazy.
We interrupt this podcast to bring you a commercial.
Sports Stories with Denny Lennon aims to bring its subscribers interesting, unique, and uplifting stories. You can find us at sportstoriespodcast.com. We drop audio, video podcasts every Thursday and go live at 5 on YouTube 4 nights a week. That's Sports Stories with Denny Lennon.
And now back to our interview.
Al Skates, I heard him talk a little bit this one time, and I guess you might have been on the national team maybe as early as 79 or something, and he spoke about going to Japan for a game, and you played on the concrete? Do you remember this?
Yes.
That's wild.
In those days, the regulations in college volleyball were different than they are now. So now you have certain periods where you can train and compete and all that, and you're limited to 20 hours a week. And then you have periods where you have no time, and then you have periods where you get 8 hours a week. Well, in those days, there were no limitations at all. So the first day of school at UCLA was the first day of practice.
Okay.
And we would practice 5 days a week, and we would lift, and we would do everything else. I'm lucky again that there were no limitations because it made for more time for all of us to develop as players and physically. And so we had a really long season, but Al would break it up by he started taking us on foreign trips. We went to one to Taipei for a tournament in Taiwan, and another one in I think it might have been in maybe January of 81, maybe before my junior year. We went to a tournament or a series of matches in Japan. And it's a really memorable series to those of us who participated because we played against 4 different university teams, and then the 5th match was a match against their university all-star or all-American team.
Okay.
And so when we got over there, I think we struggled in the first match. We might have lost that one just because, we're barely off the plane.
Just get off the plane.
Played a good team. They certainly were better than we were that day. But after that match, there was some talk amongst the Japanese like, we feel sorry for this UCLA team. They're going to get killed. If they lost to that team, most of the teams are going to be better. But we went on, I guess 2 things stand out. Number one, we just kept getting better and better and better. And so we won against the other 3 existing college teams. And then we get to the final match, and we played in the same gym that the Tokyo Olympic Games were held in, on a concrete floor.
It was enclosed?
It was enclosed.
But a concrete floor.
What the heck? And so it was amazing to play in the same venue,
Sure.
getting goosebumps again, as the birthplace of Olympic indoor volleyball,
64.
which we're in the year 2020,
2020,
where we're going to
coming
go
back.
where the Olympics goes back for the first time.
That's
But
awesome.
the Japanese brought indoor volleyball into the Olympics.
They did.
For both men and women. So a lot of people don't know it, but that was the first women's team sport to enter the Olympics before soccer, before softball, before basketball,
Terrific.
before rugby, field hockey, anything. Volleyball was the first
So that would have been a
women's
thrill to
team
be in that
sport.
venue.
So it was a thrill to be in that venue. We start out the match, and we're getting killed. It's freezing in there because they don't believe in a lot of heat. There's a real Spartan kind of warrior attitude about it. The guys on the bench have their sweats on and our sweats on, the guys on the court, because it's so cold. You could see your breath in there. And if a guy had, less hair, you would just see steam coming off the head. So we get killed like the first one, 15-2. Next one, it's closer. But Al, I'll never forget, he never relented in terms of his belief that we could win this match, and we were supposed to get killed. And so we chip away, we start blocking them. This is side-out volleyball, but
Right.
in the fifth one, we stuffed them probably 11 times and beat them
wow.
15-2.
Well, he says
it
the
was
spark
amazing.
was you actually diving on the concrete,
Yeah.
making a play, and then getting up and putting that ball away, and everybody just fed off of that, that you went ahead and laid out on the concrete, and now it's time to go.
That was really fun series, and fun to get to see how the rest or some part of the rest of the world would do it. It's a real eye-opener to see great players playing a very different style of volleyball than we played.
Sure.
But a great clash. And then the other thing I remember from that trip was we were having some struggles in serve receive. And so at first we just started doing it a little because I was still in this two-setter offense. And so in the front row, I helped pass a little, but I would start backing up and covering for somebody else. And so then Al kind of liked that. And he was like, yeah, you know what, Karch, why don't you take more and more and more court? And so eventually that led to, with USA, our two-passer formation.
Because Al was your coach.
Well, Al wasn't my coach with USA, but I had a ton
at that time.
of experience taking,
wow, Karch,
being a
that's the
receiver of
beginning.
serve. He encouraged me and encouraged us to have our best passers basically take a huge area. And that prepared me really well for USA because we eventually went to a strictly two-passer formation. Before there was jump spin serving, you couldn't do that in these
Not today,
days.
but now concurrently, what was interesting at UCLA, you were playing in a lot of beach tournaments, and Al encouraged this, was okay with it, Coach Skates you out.
Yep. Well, he had a history of lots of great beach volleyball
Sure.
players there. Mike Norman, Jim Menges, Kirk Kilgore. I mean,
You're forgetting some, but there's just a ton.
A ton. So I think Al loved it because now his guys are playing year-round. They're playing beach all summer, and when they get to school, UCLA starts a little later on the quarter system, but they get to school in September. And from day one, they're back indoors, and they have a whole long lead up to the season, which the competitive season starts in January. Finish in May, right back to beach. And so I think he loved the fact that guys were touching a ball and playing the game two different versions of the game they needed to play, and giving their bodies a break in the summertime on the softer sand. So it's a nice change and good for their health.
Now, you certainly got a lot of repetitions coming into playing beach from East Beach, but I would imagine once you got to Los Angeles, and is that where you and St. John decided to go ahead and play in some tournaments?
Yep.
And that's a formidable pair, but you're still young enough that the older veterans, I'm sure, are looking to beat you guys.
For sure. Going back a little, I just want to give my dad some credit for one of the great gifts he gave me. When we were playing, I was 11, all the way up till about 15, we were a team. And I couldn't think of it any other way. But at some point, and we never played in opens. Some people would enter the Manhattan Open just to say, I lost 15-1 to Ron Von Hagen or Jim Menges, or I got hit in the face by Ron Von Hagen or Tom Shamalis. We didn't want to enter just to enter and get beat like a drum. So we wouldn't enter. We would go watch some of them, but we would never enter. And then the Santa Barbara Open was coming up. A great local player, he wasn't a AAA player, but he was a very good local player, named Rich Payne, asked me to play. And this is the first time I had to think about, well, wait a minute, the only guy I've ever played with is my dad, and I don't know what to do. So I go to my dad, Laz, and just say, okay, Rich has asked me to play. What should I do? And it's a really special gift. He just said, you know what, Karch, you're getting way too good for me. You need to move on. If you were to stay with me, you would hold back your development. So you need to play with Rich. Played with Rich. We had a great tournament. There were a number of amazing matches. We were unseeded and beat some teams, and eventually played Menges and Lee, the best team on the at that time in beach volleyball. And it was an incredible experience, but it happened because my dad encouraged me to move on. So then we go forward to playing with St. John. So then I started moving on to partners, and one year I asked St. John to play, but I was still a pretty scrawny kid and not anything that might at first glance impress somebody as somebody who could win opens. And so St. John was committed to playing with his brother Andrew that season, and I played with some other people, but eventually we both realized, and I approached him again, and we could be a good team. And so we won every tournament we played that year.
Wow.
We won a ton. So that was 1979, and he was, to get to play with St. John, one of the all-time greats in beach volleyball, was phenomenal. And I got to play with many others along the way, like Mike Dodd and Tim Hovland and Ken Steffes and Adam Johnson and Mike Lambert and Kevin Wong, and the list goes on.
Sports Stories with Denny Lennon is supported by the AAU. Find a local event and join at aausports.org. And remember, you can catch your favorite amateur sports live stream, replays, and highlights at ballertv.com. Sports Stories, along with East Bay, supports the Heroes Movement, a nonprofit that bridges the gap from mental or physical therapy to getting strong again through strength and conditioning workouts. This free service is available for any veteran of the United States Armed Forces. Visit heroesmovementusa.org for more information. Sports Stories, along with thousands of people across the country, also supports the My Stuff Bags Foundation, a nonprofit that provides traumatized children with new belongings and new hope. Learn more at mystuffbags.org. Sports Stories with Denny Lennon is a production of Sports Stories, Inc. and is available on Apple Podcasts and YouTube or wherever you listen and watch. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and give us a review. It really helps spread the word. You can find all our social media links, archives, and other info on our website at sportsstoriespodcast.com. Special thanks to the John R. Wooden Course and Wooden's Wisdom. Original music for Sports Stories is courtesy of Lennon Music Productions. Original images by Sienna Lennon Photography. Sports Stories is produced by Christine Jimbo and Marley Rice. Sports Stories is edited by Bob McCall. Additional staff include Ray Castro, Teresa Dolan, Jake Downey, Carlos Haro, and Buck Magic Lennon.
What a day for a daydream. A custom made for a daydreaming boy. And I'm lost in my daydream. A dreaming about my bundle of joy. But don't you know I gotta be back at 5. Sports Story comes on YouTube, it's live. And you can come watch it anytime you like. What a day for a daydream.
Check it out, Buck.